Before I get started with the video, check out my Etsy store for my professional controller desoldering tool. You can take off a stick in about 1 second.
Jeez, it's that easy.
All 4 sensors you see below are going to have pretty much the same quality and speed and precision. Now the most raw output is going to be the standard ALPS potentiometer. Now this is because it isn't an electronic component. The only thing that it is a resistor. So any of the electronics that are happening are within the controller itself. So the question is, why would you want to replace it with these 3 sensors over here? Well, the issue that a lot of people talk about is drift. Now, there's a lot of confusion about what drift is. Drift is 2 different things. So one of the things is the mechanical drift. So when you set a small dead zone and you push it around from side to side and it just sort of, your aim just sort of trails and drifts in that direction. Now that, in most cases, is a mechanical drift. So what sensor drift is it means when you put an input into the controller, sometimes the input is completely wrong. Sometimes you'll push it this way and the input is saying that it's going that way and it's just traveling around all weird. And this is what a lot of people call drift. That is sensor drift, and that is a lot of times a bigger issue than the actual mechanical drift. So all of these sensors below, you're still going to get mechanical drift over time, where the sensors are going to get worn out, they're going to feel a little bit sloppier in the center, and the components are just going to feel a little bit loose over time.
So one thing to keep in mind is if you're going to be swapping out sticks, you're going to need to calibrate your controller, because every time you swap out your sticks, they're going to look something like this. Dead zones are going to be completely off. Circularity is going to be completely off. This doesn't matter if you have a potentiometers or Hall effect or TMR. It doesn't matter. They're always going to look like this because controllers are calibrated to specific sensors, because all sensors are a little bit different. I'm going to leave the link to both Gamepad Tester and the DualShock tools, the calibration software, in the link. So what you're going to want to do is you want to connect your DualSense controller. Now this only works with DualSense controller. I believe it works with the DualShock 4 as well. So just do a quick calibration. So put it to the upper left, let go, continue, upper right, let go, continue, lower left, continue, lower right, continue. All right, so it's that simple. And then you calibrate the range. I like to do a few circles one way, a few circles the other way. Done. Okay, range calibration complete. Now let's test our circularity. And there you go. That simple. You could also go a little bit further with the fine-tuned stick calibration. I might go into that in another video on how to get your sticks absolutely perfect, but this is good enough, and it's pretty much going to be the same as factory settings. So what you want to do is you want to save your changes permanently. Okay. And that's it. Your controller is fully calibrated, perfect centers, and perfect ranges.
Now, there might be some differences in the way that they're constructed. From what I could see, probably out of the construction, the Jinful one probably is going to last you the longest. I took apart these sensors, and inside, a lot of the plastic components are really beefy. You could see, compared to like the Hallpie one, how much thicker a lot of the components are on the inside. And I'm not completely sure because I haven't actually tested it, but I would assume, just based on numerous things from these modules, that these are probably going to last you the longest. Now, another thing I noticed is also, like on the standard ALPS modules, over time the click gets a little bit soft and it gets a little bit loose, and that's because this plastic component over here, right near the click, it gets worn out. Now on the Jinful one, they completely stamp it out of metal, so that's never going to get worn out over there. So definitely props to Jinful with the way that they designed their module. So now let me talk about the difference in feel between these. So the Favor Union versus the ALPS. So this was the first that I tested for this video, mainly because I never actually tried the Favor Unions before. These are actually the newest ones. And the thing that I found is both of these feel super identical. They're super similar in the way that the sensor actually feels. Now the main difference that I feel is there's a little bit more smoothness inside the actual module, and it's a little bit kind of more slop in the dead zone area. So if you're trying to do a fine micro movement, it's a little bit more twitchy, which is actually a feel that I prefer. So overall, between the two modules, my favorite in feel is for sure, out of all of these actually, my favorite in feel is actually the favor union. And that's a lot to do with personal preference, just because of personal feel that I like. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is also the ginful. Now, the ginful module has a very hard snap in the center. It holds the tightest dead zone out of all these, but it also has the most harsh dead zone. So the dead zone is really snappy and it's really like aggressive and hard. And it's not really a feel that I actually like that much. So it's not really very forgiving when you're doing small micro adjustments. But for anyone that does like that hard, snappy feel, you're definitely going to like the ginfuls. Another thing that I did notice when I was testing out the ginfuls is they do hold the tightest dead zone, but one thing, I think it's because of the way it's constructed on the inside, I'll notice that the dead zone is very, very tight, but that dead zone still shifts. So that's a super annoying feeling if you play with a very, very small dead zone, because you feel it like harsh and it doesn't have any play to it. It sometimes just settles in the wrong area. And that kind of like defeats the purpose of having a really small and tight dead zone. So that's one thing to consider, that just because this thing holds a tighter dead zone doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. Now, there is something that I feel once in a while. They're all very, very fast sensors. One thing that I noticed, I didn't feel it in the other sensors, but I don't know if it was the feeling of the mechanism itself that was kind of throwing me off, with that hard dead zone in the center. But one thing that I noticed is once in a while I'd feel like a slow input. This could also be maybe a slight linearity issue in the stick itself, the actual linear reading to it. But once in a while I'd feel kind of like a little bit of a dead spot. And one of the things that I thought of that I might have is some sort of filtering inside of it, because it has noise. It is possible that all three of these have some sort of filtering in it. I just noticed the one on the ginful the most. But it also could have just been a placebo effect where I just thought that I was feeling something because I knew I was playing on an electromagnetic sensor that may have some filtering in it. I may have just came up to the conclusion in my head. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it does have that. I couldn't really conclude that feeling. So the last one that I didn't really talk about too much is the Hall Pie. So Hall Pie is very, very similar to the Alps module, just the way that it's built, the construction of it, the feel of it, and everything. So if you want to just do a direct replacement to the Alps sensor and have something as similar feeling as possible, then I'll definitely go with the Hall Pie one. So generally everything just feels just normal and the same. This is also the same sensor as the Goalie Kit sensor, but you're going to get it cheaper because you're not going to get it with their thumbstick replacements and everything. So if you just want to have a direct feel to having the same as the Alps modules, I would for sure just go with the Hall Pie. So are you going to get a better experience if you replace the Alps sensor? In my opinion, yes, a little bit. And it's just because of the consistency over time. So over time, since these are resistors that are scraping against a surface and eventually get worn out, your aim is slowly changing over time. With these electromagnetic sensors, they're going to be a lot more consistent over time, and you're going to be able to adapt to its feel a little bit better. So in conclusion, I think that the new TMR technology is a legitimate replacement to the standard potentiometer sensors.